and a very warm welcome to our 147th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And we're nowadays here most Thursday afternoons, where what we do, Thursday afternoons UK time, I should say, and what we do is we examine a topic of interest to the security world. And the idea of thought leadership is that we critique today events and issues in order that we may get a better type of security tomorrow, a better type of thinking, a better type of provision, and a better way forward. And the topic today is one that I think is crucial to the security sector. Security and journalism. Is the industry getting the reporting that it deserves? And when you think one of the Achilles heels of the security sector is the fact that it's seen to be a grudge purchase on the one hand, and the images are often negative. And is this because of the way it's reported? And if so, whose fault is it, and what do we do to think about it differently? Well, we've got three panelists, all very actively involved in this area. I'm going to I'm going to invite each of them to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I will ask them each for their opening statement. And once we've heard that, we'll come to you, the audience, and ask you for questions. And please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and I will endeavour to incorporate your question into the ensuing discussion. So very much look forward to that. Without further ado then, let's go over and meet our panellists. And first of all, in the UK, Andrea. Andrea, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone, and it's a great pleasure to be invited today and be part of this panel. So my name is Andrea Burkhoff, and I'm editor of City Security magazine and the content manager for our associated website and social media. January will mark my 10th anniversary with the magazine, and during that time we've developed our website as an information archive and resource. We produce a digital version of the magazine, and we've increased our social media presence. We aim to share good practice, innovation, ideas, and promote and support the security sector. We work in partnership with the City of London Crime Prevention Association to produce the magazine, and believe that all publications and media make an important contribution to security and supporting the security sector. My previous 10 years were in community safety, working in partnership with local authorities and police to prevent all types of crime and antisocial behaviour.
Andrea, thank you very much indeed. Well, from the UK, we go all the way over to Arlington, Virginia, and we meet Claire. Claire, please introduce yourself.
Hello and good afternoon to you, and good morning to my fellow Americans on this side of the Atlantic. Thank you very much for helping coordinate this and having me on to participate. My name is Claire Meyer. I'm the managing editor of Security Management Magazine, and that's the publication of ASIS International, which is a professional association for security leaders. So we've been publishing for almost 50 years. We look forward to continuing publishing for another 50 or more as we track the various and sundry challenges that security professionals face. So that is just a brief overview. There's always more to discuss.
And I'm sure we will, Claire. Thank you very much indeed. And finally, let's go and meet Mark. Mark, please introduce yourself.
Hello, world. I can confirm my name is Mark Rowe. I'm the editor of Professional Security magazine. I'm speaking to you from my home office in my hometown of Burton-upon-Trent, Staffordshire, England. And looking out the window, there's a beautiful porcelain blue sky, and there's a sunset after a cold day. I started as a journalist on the Wiltshire Times in Trowbridge in England in December 1989. And I've been editor of Professional Security, a monthly print magazine still, and a website and email newsletters since November 1999.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, there are our panelists, obviously three experts, as you can tell, in security reporting, security publishing. Very much looking forward to hear what they've got to say about this. Don't forget, audience, here's your chance. These are the people that report the news. Do put your questions using the question answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to incorporate it. Okay, so Andrea, can we have your opening statement, please? Andrea, 3 minutes, if you don't mind, for your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm very much looking forward to hearing my colleagues' views on this as well. So security touches the lives of everyone, and there's a general interest in it and related areas. We print about 10,000 copies of our magazine, of which about 5,000 are distributed at mainstream media stands throughout London, and they're taken very quickly. So this is a good indicator to us that our editorial approach, that you don't have to be a security professional to be interested in security, is about right. Of course, the general public perception of security often begins with security officers, but scratch the surface of this knowledge and people are aware of other aspects of security. They know something of CCTV, alarms, close protection, private investigators, cybercrime, the fact you need a security pass to get into a building, X-ray scanners at airports, and so on. People have a vague idea how this all fits together under the general term of security. But for the security sector to continue to progress, we need to further develop this awareness. I've certainly experienced individuals and organisations who do not want to talk about their security measures. There will be good reasons not to reveal all aspects of personal or corporate security. But of course, there are some aspects which are useful to promote: personal safety of staff and clients, protection of clients' data and privacy, to name just a few. Also, we know that terrorists and other criminals research their targets and avoid locations with strong security. So sharing your security can form part of your security. And I do believe that we need to raise the profile of the security sector more broadly, specifically in the UK, where I know something about it. This will enable the sector to attract the best people to join us. It will encourage a more diverse workforce. Also, we all know that we need everyone, whether in a business setting, socialising or at home, to understand and follow security guidance. We can't work in a vacuum. We need everyone to pull together to get people, businesses, events and buildings safe. So what is the real question here? Do we want to raise the profile of security with the general public by more mainstream media coverage? I don't think this is necessarily the full answer and probably isn't a realistic approach. The mainstream media, newspapers, TV, know their target audience and do have an enormous appetite for stories. But the ins and outs of the security sector probably don't fulfil their brief, unless related to a big national or international story. Nevertheless, they have a 24/7 need for stories, so there is a place for promoting the sector with them. Another key consideration is the way people access and consume information. Print newspaper circulation is in the decline. Most young people get their views from social media, not print or terrestrial channels. So any approach to raising the sector's profile must take this into account. So against the context I've provided here, I have 3 or 4 ideas for the security sector to consider to create a more positive and fuller understanding of the role of the general public. Firstly, a coherent strategic public relations campaign for the security sector developed by professional PR specialists. They should have clear objectives and identify the communications channels to target. And secondly, alongside this, role models and key figures to represent and explain the sector. People like the familiar, and a famous or well-known person encourages engagement with stories. Thirdly, I believe the security sector needs to carry out more PR and marketing outside of the sector itself, with the related sectors and areas of business such as HR, facilities management, insurance, and the financial sector. And lastly, the security sector must continue developing its professional approach and promoting this. What people see and the experience they have of security professionals and security systems forms a big part of the perception of security.
Andrea, thank you very much indeed. Well, lots of good thoughts there. Tell you to come back on. Before we do, let's hear from our other panelists. Claire, your thoughts, your opening statement, please.
Sure. So I can speak from my experience with security management and also before that Security Magazine. And our philosophy has been and continues to be, we are reporting the news that will help security professionals do their jobs more effectively and also perform in the realm of the business world more effectively. So how we report is less looking at specific incidents, but more broader trends, what perhaps examples of those incidents might lead you to need to research more. So we're looking at a bigger picture. Now, there is a gap there of this promotional angle for the security profession. But that's where associations come into play. That's where outreach comes into play. And that's also where internal publication comes into play. So security professionals within their own associations or within their own organizations can work to share those positive stories, get that footprint a little bit more obvious internally instead of going straight out to the media. There can be a lot of different approaches to building that profile that we seek to educate more how to go about that instead of us doing it ourselves.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thoughtful. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff there we can come back on. Let's move on then to Mark. And just before Mark speaks, just to say, if you've got a question, do use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll incorporate it into the ensuing discussion. Several people have already. Get your question on there, and we'll get it before the panel. Mark, your opening thoughts, please.
Thank you, Martin. Since you announced this subject and kindly invited me as a panelist, I've given this considerable thought, and it's been helpful for me to think about myself, my own job, and my place in the security industry and my profession. But this morning I decided that all the opinions that I'd thought of telling you, I decided to chuck them all out because opinions are cheap. That was one of the points I was going to make, is that the internet killed the media that I joined and have started in 1999. And the reason is, in a word, the internet, that it killed the traditional media because the value of the printed written word collapsed to zero. So instead of adding to all the stuff, I thought I'd tell you a story. This story's from 2017. It starts with one of the terror attacks here in the UK at London Bridge and then Borough Market. You'll recall that 3 terrorists used a van as a vehicle as a weapon on the bridge, and then with knives went marauding and killed people until they were shot dead by armed police. And after that, there was a number of people who were publicised for deservedly who did heroic things. There was a British transport police officer who took on the terrorists with his baton and was seriously hurt. And understandably, the BTP made a lot of that, and the man recovered and got awards. And then there was at least one member of the public who took on the terrorists, and naturally the mainstream media lapped that up because it was a human interest story and everyone could relate to that. But what of the security people on pub doors and elsewhere who did their jobs, but they rose to the occasion? Not very much was said about them, I feel. Certainly, I've got to hold my hand up. I could and should have done more. But at the end of 2017, there was an annual meeting of the hotel security managers group here in the UK that meets monthly, and they invite me to their annual meeting. In fact, I'm going there tomorrow afternoon in London. And usually they hold Security Officer of the Year awards, SOTY for short, which for people of a certain age in Britain is quite amusing. And the security officer, one of the awards at the end of 2017 was for one of these hotel security officers who performed extraordinarily well in the locking down of his hotel during the confusion of that Borough Market incident. So I took a photo of those awards, I took down details. That's the original journalism that I like to do, my contribution, if you like, the value that I add. But after that, I got emailed, certainly, and I can't remember if I got a phone call from the marketing woman of that hotel that the award-winning security officer worked for. She demanded that there be no publicity for that award. And as I say, it only came back to me today, so I've been reviewing my own part in my decision to go along with that marketing woman and not give any publicity. Should I have defied her? At the time, I thought I'd better go along with the marketing woman and not give any trouble to the security officer, because after all, I didn't want to jeopardize his job, nor the Hotel Security Association or anyone who's a reader of the magazine. So that's the fundamental problem, not only with hotels, but with the security industry in general and the rest of business and society, if you like. On the one hand, you have security that is rooted in reality. It has to be to take on, to mitigate the risks and threats from terrorists and stalkers and assassins and thieves and the like. Then you have the equivalent of that marketing woman who, I genuinely don't remember what hotel it was, but let's single out the Shangri-La Hotel that's next to the Shard in London at London Bridge. The very name Shangri-La is evocative of escape. That's the whole point of a luxury hotel, that you go there to escape reality, which includes security threats. And yet there has to be security naturally, and there is at the Shangri-La. I've never been in. That's a bit beyond my pay grade, but certainly there's physical security outside and uniform security within. What's the moral of this story? That that's what both I, as a security journalist, and the security industry are up against: the Shangri-La, the Shangri-Las of this world, and the marketing women of this world. Just before I catch breath, I want to
quickly, Mark, you wouldn't mind just sum up?
Yeah, just say something. I've reached the age where if I don't say something, I'll forget to say it. Well, there is such a thing as security-minded communication. So if you want to look that up online, that could be the key to this conundrum.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, really appreciate all those comments. Questions been flooding in meanwhile. Lots of interesting points. Let's start off with a question from Dennis Shep, who actually has been a panelist several times and was last week, and from Canada. I'll come to you first, Andrea. He's actually praises the security magazines, but of course what he argues is we need more coverage in the popular news and entertainment publications. And the question is, to what extent can people in your position help to inspire or encourage or facilitate that? Or is it nothing to do with you? Andrea first, and given what you said, Claire, I'll come to you second. Andrea.
I mean, I think the role of the security magazines has sort of been slightly outlined by my colleagues, is more around a sort of more considered approach to security stories. So the sorts of things that we cover, you know, we're only quarterly, so we're going to investigate things in depth and ask experts to write on them. And we would encourage, you know, other security professionals and experts to write for us. I think to engage with the mainstream media, as I've said in my sort of opening notes, were it may be unrealistic to expect the mainstream media to cover some of these stories. They know who their target audience is. They've got local or national or international target audiences. They know the types of stories that will sell newspapers or will attract viewers on the media or audiences on social media. So I think one of the things, as I've said, I think we need a sort of strategic overall partnership, public relations campaign to look at this as a whole, to rather than doing a sort of scattergun approach with various people sending in stories to mainstream media. I think it needs to be coordinated.
Okay, so you made that point, and I appreciate it. My question, I guess, is to just push you a little bit and say, got that, but the question is, should there be a role for people like you who are to feed the sorts of stories that are going to appeal to that audience, because they're not going to look for the reasons you've just said, but you could feed them in. So very, very briefly, is there a role for you to do that?
We could feed them in. I don't have a direct connection or way of doing that at the moment. And certainly we know about how to write stories, how to present stories. At the moment, I don't see there's a direct connection between us and the mainstream media, but I'll be interested to see what my colleagues say it's not something that we do at the moment. Whether it should be our role, I think we're operating in different areas and we're doing different things. We've got we've got different audiences. So it may be that as the sector move forwards, they call upon us to help them do that. But at the moment, there's not much of a link between what we do and what the mainstream media does.
Well, Claire,
that's where we are.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. That's true. The question is, should there be? Do you not think it's incumbent on people like yourself to try and help the profession tell a good story, which you said was part of it, and help the mainstream media do the same thing? Because without your help, it's not going to happen, it seems.
The question is are we helping, or is it our full responsibility? On the security management and ASIS side, we have a bit of a model set up right now where the journalists that work for the magazine, similar to Andrea, we are doing in-depth reporting. We are really taking a lot of time to dig into heavy issues. But we partner with our colleagues in the communications department and meet up with them regularly to explain what we're reporting on, what the news hook is, and what other groups might be interested in what we're doing. And then they go out and sort of pitch our stories to other outlets and let those other outlets know what is being done in the security industry, letting them know why this is a newsworthy story, and trying to get them interested, using our reporting as a jumping off point rather than the PR itself.
Okay. And the question is, I suppose, Claire, is that enough though? I mean, the question from us, I suppose, who are not in your world, is to say it's such an important issue, we maybe need more. Realistic or not realistic?
I won't argue that it's necessary to get a little bit more light shining on the security industry. The challenge is how to do it. Because like Andrea was mentioning, the mainstream media, they have a business model, and that business model is not always altruistic. It's what's going to get clicks, what's going to get attention, and what's going to serve the need of their largest audience. And sometimes those two things do not align. So I think at the moment, the best we can do is just the best we can do.
Okay. Mark, surely you don't agree with that. Surely you can see a way forward where you're helping the mainstream media to tell the sort of positive story that we've got here about awards and about achievements and about balancing the fact that other groups, public, British Transport Police, are getting more credit for doing something the security sector has done as well.
I think we're barking up the wrong tree here, Martin, because it's not my job to help other journalists. I mean, for goodness sake, any journalist worth half a salt would just read the online magazines. I mean, Professional Security Magazine, it's free to read online. So any journalist can read it and pinch my ideas. So I don't have to do anything. If, as for this idea of somebody from the security industry reaching out to journalists or influencers, whatever you want to call them, I can point to quite specific people, and there's not many who could and should do this. In the UK, it's people like, yes, ASIS UK chair maybe, or the Security Institute chair and chief executive, or the chief executive of the British Security Industry Association. They're busy people, we're all busy people, but they've got the position, the title to front up in front of the television cameras. A very difficult job. You've got to be available when the media want you, and the time window is very short. I'll give an example from the Manchester Arena inquiry, which is the big UK security news of the year. It made the BBC 6 o'clock news on the TV, the lead, but by the end of the night, it had dropped off the BBC website feed. So that's how it's not 24-hour news anymore. It's a sort of half or even a quarter of a day that you're on the agenda. So if you don't jump in, you don't get a voice. And then news is a market. There's any number of other occupations that are if there's a league table, that they're above private security.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we'll come back to this, I'm sure. Let's move on then. Let me come to Claire first on this one. And Claire, someone that you might know, a chap called Michael Gibbs, who's previously been on these webinars.
Oh, never heard of him.
And a regular contributor and a winner of awards now. And Michael asks about advertising pressure. Actually, interesting, Claire, someone wrote to me with a question in advance about the same question. And the extent to which the need to service advertising gets in the way of negative stories. It's an interesting point about the portrayal of news in magazines. I'll ask all of you the same thing. Just very quick, if I could come to you first, Claire. Claire, your thoughts?
Sure. So generally, when it comes to those negative portrayals, it's an issue of a single story. So we strive, and I cannot promise that we always achieve this because it is continual improvement. We strive to report on those stories in the broader context. So if it's an issue of, say, a gunman at a nightclub having not been put through a background check process as effectively as one might expect or want, we're going to report on background checks. It's not necessarily the individual failures of a single issue, but the broader challenge of what could you currently do to avoid this same issue in your organization. So we might look at an incident that could affect an advertiser and then broaden it out. Or if we are reporting on an incident that involves a company, whether it's an advertiser or not, we're going to seek for comment and then disclose any ties that they might have with us, whether that's financial ties or otherwise.
But is there a danger though? It could be seen to be getting in the way of a story. Is that a fair challenge, Claire, or not?
It is a fair challenge, and it's something that we are regularly discussing whenever something like this comes up, of how to approach things without taking an overreaction or an overcorrection, of being overly critical so that we avoid that critique. We're still going to stick to our editorial principles of finding the angle that will help security professionals do their jobs better. Okay,
thank you. Let me come to you next then, Mark. So Mark, advertising, you've got to pay the bills. The question is the extent to which this gets in the way, if at all. Do you think it does sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, since we've gone on air, Martin, I've got an email in my inbox from something called the International Security Journal announcing a headline speaker for the Intersect show. So there's about 4 or 5 email newsletters I get about UK security news, and I send one out myself, and mine's the only one that has any original journalism. In fact, one of the other emails newsletters actually uses my stuff. They do credit me, so I ought to be flattered. But every other UK email newsletter that goes out for private security has what I would, using a technical term, it's crap. It's stuff usually from manufacturers or security suppliers who are trying to sell you stuff, whether it's products or services or themselves. And the other so-called journalists out there just cut and paste and present that as if it's their own work. It's bordering on fraud, and frankly, I'm embarrassed that listeners and people in general might think that me, who does original journalism, and them are somehow on a par.
I suppose the point is, though, Mark, they would argue that to survive, they've got to promote their sponsors. That's how they make their money. Should we be concerned about the journalism in that? I mean, it doesn't mean to say that there's anything about the stories which aren't true. How do they survive?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you read any edition of Professional Security magazine or look at the website. There's stuff from advertisers and whether it's case studies or new products. But I return to the fact that the difference is original journalism, which I do try to do consistently and regularly, and other people in in this space don't do it. And I come back to the fact that within my working lifetime, and it's not just in the security trade press, it's in the related trade press, such as facilities management, and in journalism generally, there's been a collapse of standards, qualifications, paying conditions, and for the reasons you've said, we've said that loads of publications have gone bust altogether.
Okay, interesting. Andrea, would you agree with that?
I think what we try and do with the magazine is get experts to write for us, not necessarily have journalist-led material. And following on from what Claire said, what we try and do is if it's in a critical situation, we try and share learning from it. So rather than share critical stories, you know, because we're only every 3 months, it's not something that we're not reporting on a daily or a weekly basis on sort of key aspects of the news like that. But you know, following on from, say, the Manchester Arena inquiry, there's going to be a lot of coverage about how that's going to impact UK security. I think there are all sorts of different ways that we get our stories out there. So we will publish them in our magazine, we'll publish them in our digital version. We will then send them out as links on an email to our database. So we will share our stories as much as we can. But as you say, somehow or other, we have to pay for all the things that we do. So we do have to have sponsorship from our advertisers, but we try and make a clear distinction between advertorial pieces and advertising and from the sort of articles that we include.
But the question, I suppose, is do you agree with Mark that the quality of journalism has gone down because some have had to chase the money? Is that true?
I mean, I'm not sure I'm in a position to comment on that. I mean, I've been working on the magazine for 10 years, but I'm not a lifelong journalist in the same way that Mark is. I mean, I guess I'm trying to move with the times, see the audiences that we've got, see the situation that we're in and make the best of it. As I said, in the UK, as Mark said, that the readership of the print press is completely reducing and is probably going to disappear. Yeah. But I think that magazines, not just security magazines, but across the board, there are still many thousands of magazines being produced in all sorts of different ways. And they still have a readership. People still enjoy them. One of the things that we do get feedback on our magazine that people do enjoy reading it. So we have a sort of mixture of content coming both from, from people who write it from scratch for us, from people who aren't journalists, who aren't professional writers, some material we put together ourselves. So we try and just make it an interesting read. So okay. I think there's lots of ways, different ways to skin a cat, I think, in this area.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. I'm going to move on if that's all right. I'm going to come to Mark. I'll come to you first this time. And a good question from Ewan Grant. I'll come to you first. I'll come to Claire second. Who regularly contributes good questions, actually. Security has many angles, so does journalism. What types of security issues are well covered by what types of journalism? And I suppose the key question, Mark, is what questions are not, and why not? So Mark first and maybe Claire second. Mark.
The thing that comes to mind in response to that is that a metaphor I use is that I'm always spinning plates. That I've always understood that I've got to cover all sorts of security in the British Isles. So I try and think in terms of readers. Some will be in cyber, some in electronic and network security, some in man guarding. Then you've got the different sectors: retail loss prevention, campuses. Just to think of where I've been lately. This week I've been to a banking security conference. As I say, I'm going to a hotel gathering tomorrow. So I'm forever spinning plates, trying to get up to date, or rather trying to update readers about all the different sectors, all the legal developments, keep up with current affairs generally that have got security angles. And I'm forever finding 6 months has gone by, and then I think, blow me, I'm out of date with with such and such a subject, and sort of dash back to spin the plate again. So to actually answer the question, probably equally with everything.
Okay, fair enough. Claire, your thoughts on that?
Oh, I feel your pain, Mark. There is a lot to follow. There is a lot to chase on a daily basis. So on my team, and I'm lucky to have a team of very effective journalists who keep up with their beats. So we have one person focusing on cybersecurity, another is really honing in on utilities and what the challenges are in that space. But there's still too much for 3 people to cover on a regular basis. So one area that I feel we're trying to focus on more, especially as we go forward, and I've seen it mentioned a couple times in the chat, is the challenge of business. So the business of security and the security of the business. I'm hearing from more CSOs and security leaders that I interview, their advice to people coming into the industry who want to reach that level is get an MBA. If you're not able to communicate on this business level, you're not going to advance high enough. So that's something that I'm trying to put into context more often for our readers, is how to take security principles and put them through a business lens. And that's hard to get at when there's always a new data breach, or if you're in the United States, a new active assailant incident that needs covering. So it's definitely a constant plates in the air situation, but that's a challenge that we're looking at right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand that. I guess there's not subjects you avoid. It's more that there are so many. Okay, fair enough. Let's move on, and I want to come to you, Andrea, with a question from Matthew Porcelli. Matthew's asking about getting articles from the front line and about young people, because I guess from the front line, we're going to get a perception of security work in action, wherever front line you want to choose. And from young security professionals about the fact that here's an inspiring, interesting world to be in. And maybe there's a case, Andrea, that both of those are neglected. Would you agree?
I think it's a really good and interesting idea. I think that the sort of career pathways in security are something that we need to explore more and explain more, encouraging more people to come into security and explain all the different roles. I mean, as we talked about right at the beginning, what is security? What all of these different areas, what does it cover, and what does that mean for young people? I think if people are coming in at the front line, and by that you might mean as a security officer or in a sort of junior apprenticeship level in one of a sort of security roles, then yes, it would be, I think it would be really valuable to hear from them. We try and encourage people to write for us, bring in their views on all different aspects of roles, and sometimes we'll include young people. It is really nice to, if they have something to say, if they're ready to say it, then we're happy to hear from them. I think you're right. One of the areas that we don't necessarily hear that much from is the front line. Our security officers working on the front line. That's a group we could reach out to more. We talk about them a lot. We have their supervisors, their managers, their senior managers speaking, but we don't necessarily hear from them.
Would you be prepared to do that, Andrea? Is that a step forward for you to do that?
I would be very happy to do that, yeah.
Claire?
I would think so, yes.
I mean, would you agree it's a neglected area first? Claire?
Stories from the front lines, yes.
Yes.
I think so.
Why is it neglected?
It's a challenge to get those people on the phone. I mean, similar to Mark's issue with the marketing director at that hotel, sometimes when you go down the chain, there are a lot of people between you and that frontline worker. When you want to get that story, when you want to talk to them directly, they're having to go through many, many layers of review. So it could be helpful if they're speaking to you in a different capacity, so not necessarily representing their company. It's also helpful to talk to people who have moved on from that front line, who are then looking back. So there are a couple different ways to get at it, but I feel like sometimes the red tape gets in the way of those stories.
Very, very quickly, Mark, just you on the same question about the front line. Very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, I want to get a final question in.
Yes, I mean, I just go back to about spinning plates, that there's so much to say about the security industry. That's why we're all here. That and I'm amazed that you've got a team of three. Or maybe I need to clone myself.
Okay, final question for each of you then. It's a question that's prompted slightly by Glenn Kitteringham, slightly by Keith Nielsen. I'm sorry I can't do justice to both their questions, but we've had an engaging conversation here. And it's this question that given that you three are at the forefront in presenting the security world to audiences, what can we do? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you each do to promote the positive side of the security sector to the broader public? In other words, how can we promote a better image? So I'm not just asking your current roles. I'm asking you in terms of what is it that we can do to do it? So single issue, strategic level, what's the single most important thing to do? Claire, you first, please.
All right. Well, it might sound a little self-serving, but I promise you can share any stories. They're not just mine. One thing that I would ask, we need force multipliers. So we've talked a lot on this call that we can't do it all from just the journalistic standpoint. Security professionals just sharing security news on social media, sharing it with other people, your friends, that will eventually get in front of journalists. We're constantly scrolling through different news feeds, and the more something is shared, the more attention it's going to get. So if you want to use that megaphone to share some security stories, that would help heighten that profile. Fair
enough. Sounds good to me. Andrea, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would back that up. I think that if we are quite inward looking in some ways, in that the security publications are read mainly by people with an interest in security. Social media, we all follow each other and click and like and share each other's. So I think the more that we can speak about security, share stories about security, whether in our internal communications for larger organisations, it all helps to build that picture of a strong, positive sector. And I think that's definitely one way of doing it.
Mark, finally to you. Final comment, if you wouldn't mind, Mark, from you.
Again, I'll just repeat this about security-minded communications, and there's some very bright and nice people at the CPNI, UK Police and Security Services people who are behind things like Project Servitor, a big subject in itself. You could have a webinar about Servitor alone and its relation to security. Part of that is communicating about good security that deters the bad guys.
Thank you very much indeed. Look, thank you very much indeed, panelists. That's been absolutely fantastic. We could have gone on. We didn't get through all the questions. I know many of you, I didn't get through any of the questions sent to me in advance either. But thank you very much indeed. Clearly, it's a vital topic, one right at the heart of how we improve the perception of the security sector. Really, really appreciate your insights. A few final comments from me, if you wouldn't mind, just to let you know that the outstanding security performance entries are still open in India. They close in the 10th. Ireland, a note that they close on the 15th of December, and New Zealand on the 14th of January. Also to note that you can register for these award ceremonies, the Tackle Economic Crime Awards on the 6th of December, the inaugural Cyber OSPAs on the 14th of December. They're virtual and they're free. Do register for free. And the first OSPAs of 2022 is in the UK in London on the 24th of February. If you want to come along, you need to register ASAP. It's a physical event, all going well, of course. Also to say that we've got a lot going on between now and the end of December. So we've got the Techers, as I've just said, on the 6th of December. That's Monday. Then we've got now, if you're in the UK or you're in the United States, you're westward on the 8th of December. We have Learning from New Zealand, the opportunities and challenges for New Zealand security. We're going to be hearing all about that for the first time. Now, it's being broadcast at 11 AM in New Zealand. So that is 11 a.m. New Zealand, that's 10 p.m. in the UK. It'll be daytime if you're west of here. So, or evening daytime if you're west of here. So do look out for that. It's an unusual time, but we're trying to get New Zealand in. And we can't expect New Zealand to get up in the middle of the night. In fact, I tried and they weren't that keen. Who could blame them? And then on the 14th of December, just to say, the inaugural Cyber OSPAs, do come and join us free of charge. So thank you once again to my panel. Thank you very much indeed to you, the audience, for asking questions. Don't forget, a blog will be on the website tomorrow. Hope to see you on Monday at the Techers or next week at the New Zealand webinar. Until we meet again, wherever that is, stay safe.